those of us in the northern hemisphere, winter is coming, and the combination of shorter daylight hours and colder temperatures makes motivating yourself for training that much harder.
You may have planned in an end of season break, but once that's over, there's a few things you'll want to consider to help make your training that little bit more enjoyable. So we've put together a list to help you with your training over the winter months.
This time of year, the road conditions tend to worsen, and that can be from the added rain or icy surfaces, or sometimes extra debris on the roads.
And with that in mind, it's possibly worth considering switching from your summer slick race tyres that probably aren't going to survive the winter months to something that's a bit more puncture resistant and with a bit more tread. And to make it that little bit more puncture resistant, you can actually add a sealant to the tyres too.
The width of your tyres can make a difference as well, so opting for 25 or 28mm will mean you can run at a slightly lower pressure, and therefore you'll have a more comfortable ride, as well as the added bonus of a little more grip.
And with the increased risk of punctures over the winter, you may want to carry an extra spare inner tube. And with it being slightly colder for most of us over the winter, using a traditional pump can be tricky, so you may want to try using a CO2 canister for a quicker fix.
There are many mudguard options on the market, all offering varying levels of protection, and you'll find actually that some clubs do insist that riders use mudguards during the winter months, as it's rather unsociable to have muddy water flying off your back wheel into the face of the rider behind you.
That said, they can be a little bit of a faff to fit, and it does depend a little bit on your bike, so it's worth doing a bit of research before you do invest. But do make sure you fit them correctly, because there's nothing worse than having a rubbing mudguard or one that falls off every time you go over a pothole.
A less permanent option is using an R-saver, which just slots underneath your saddle, so it's very easy to put on, but it probably won't protect the rider behind you, although it'll hopefully keep your back a little drier.
Over the winter, we tend to have less light in the mornings and evenings, but don't let that hamper your training. If you plan on training before or after work, you will want to invest in some lights. But there are essentially two different types of lights. You've got those to be seen and those to see. So depending on the type of riding you're doing and where you're riding will depend on those type of lights that you want. You also want to consider the life or the charge of those lights for the riding that you're doing.
Now, lights aren't just for cycling. If you're going to be running where there's no street lamps, then investing in a head torch and some reflective clothing is a good idea. And it's also worth considering maybe having a light on the back of your head or on your arm just to help with your visibility. Training in the winter can be a little less intense, so it's a great time to get on top of any niggles. Now, whatever time of year, looking after your body with regular stretching and mobility work is important, but if you have got any injuries or any weaknesses that you've identified, now is a great time to get on top of them.
And don't forget, maintenance isn't just for your body, it's also really important for all your other equipment and your bike. Your bike takes a real hammering over the winter due to the conditions, so make sure you keep on top of cleaning it to prevent the parts from deteriorating too quickly. And good practice is to clean your bike as soon as you finish your ride.
Not all of us have the luxury of a shed or a room dedicated solely for our training, but if you do have enough space, then setting up a permanent training area is a great way to not only save time, but also reduce any excuses and mean that you do it today rather than tomorrow. And if you do happen to have a spare bike, setting that up on the turbo really will reduce your excuses. But if, like most of us, you don't have that luxury of the extra space or the spare bike, then it might be worth investing in a spare wheel and tyre that you can swap onto your bike if you're still riding it on the road. Personally, I'm not a fan of training in the cold weather, but having the correct clothing can make all the difference. So investing in a few key pieces can make those winter sessions that much more enjoyable.
Well, it's really important to keep your core warm, but it is essential to keep your extremities warm as well. So make sure you have some overshoes for cycling, some gloves and something for your head. And when it's really cold, you may want to keep your neck warm as well. At this time of year, you may decide to mix up your running training with some off-road running, but before you do, you might want to switch out your normal running shoes for something with a little bit more grip like these. And if it's boggy or wet where you are, you might also want something that's a little bit more waterproof.
With less daylight hours at this time of year, I personally tend to use shorter loops for my cycling and running training. So then if anything goes wrong or the weather suddenly changes, you're not going to be left 60 kilometres from home, soaking wet and freezing cold.
Well, we all know how hard it is training over the winter, so hopefully those tips will help you out.
If you've enjoyed this, give it a thumbs up, like, and to subscribe to GTN, just click on the globe. And if you want some tips on how to balance working and training for triathlon, we've got a great video from pro triathlete Peter Hemrick just here.
And to see our trail running tips, just click down here.